Good morning, friends. It's Saturday, and I'm back with chapter 38 of my upcoming book, Campaign at Fort Stix. This is the next to the last chapter of the book. Now it's time to grab a snack, dim the lights, and let me take you into the mists of time with a story I call Regrouping. We stayed in a weekly motel while Dad found us a new place to live. We were a practical family, taking things in stride and doing what was necessary to move on. Once things were settled for the evening, the mood became somber. It was quite a shock going to school happy and coming home to suddenly being homeless. While he never spoke of it, I think it hit my dad the hardest. Not only did the family historical home burn down at a time when he was financially unable to rebuild it, but it moved him once again from the stability of family. Living near Grandpa, Aunt Florence, and Uncle Al had a way of keeping him focused. Instead of spending every evening either drinking at the shop or at a bar, he usually came home after work. It provided stability for us kids, too. I woke up in the middle of the first night there in a panic because I had not fed and watered my chickens and ducks after school. I was miles away and would not be there to do it in the morning either. Luckily, I got to stay home from school that Friday, and it did not hurt that I had not slept well. Dad took the day from work and we went to the farm first thing in the morning. I fed and watered the birds and gathered up a bunch of eggs to take back to Mom. I grabbed my bike from the garage and put it in the truck so I would have it at the motel, and then we spent several hours going through the house. We were claiming what was still good and packing it up in the garage. The kitchen cabinets were charred, but Mom's dishes were not hurt. I was surprised the plastic bowls had not melted, but I guess those old cabinets were made of some pretty heavy wood. I did manage to recover my money jar, pocket knife, and other small valuables from the cabinet in my front porch room, including my special marbles and steelies. But the record player and records were melted blobs. The fire did not touch my box of comics and outdoor magazines, but the water did. They were ruined beyond salvage. In Fort Stix, I grabbed a few things I kept there, and as an afterthought, I grabbed the magazine I salvaged from the burn barrel. I folded it up neatly and tucked it away in my dad's truck for him to find, since I knew the rest of his collection was now ashes in the bathroom closet. I had happened upon them when searching for a washcloth. When we were done, everything was packed in the garage with Dad's tools, waiting for us to find a new place so we could come back and gather it up. As we pulled away that afternoon, I looked across the field at Fort Stix and wondered if someone would ever enjoy it the way I did. Like I said before, there were no other kids in the neighborhood. Another new era of my life was beginning. Each day, Mom or Dad drove Mark and I to school and picked us up. Nothing much changed at school other than my occasional after-school long-distance runs for my life. Aunt Janita helped Mom out with extra baby clothes and a crib, and my cousins sent second-hand clothes for Mark. I got a new load of school clothes, but they ended up being everything clothes since most of mine perished in the fire as well. Dad and Grandpa found another local farmer who wanted my chickens and ducks within the first week, so my daily trips before and after school to feed them stopped. I think both Mom and Dad were glad of this because it meant they could sleep in. It also helped me to let go of Fort Stix. Grandpa took over my garden and told Dad to come and see him each week to pick up a basket with a week's worth of vegetables. He told me I could come and stay on the weekends if I wanted and work with him in our gardens. That actually only ever happened once, as Dad had me at the shop most weekends working on buses and cars. Then, just before school let out for the summer, Dad found a place out in Chesterton, even further from Hobart. Life slowly got back to normal. One evening after school, we stopped at the farm and loaded up all the stuff we saved from the fire and took it to the new place out in Chesterton. In the short time we were gone, the grass around the burned house grew up very tall, and masses of hornets and wasps moved into the now open building. The trees filled with leaves and greened up around Fort Stix, completing the camouflage I planned when building it. I was pleased to see this because it gave proof of my vision. A letter came from the city one day, billing Dad for the fire department services on the day of the fire. He got together with Grandpa, and they talked to the city to come to an agreement. In return for allowing the fire department to use the building for training purposes and burn it completely down in a controlled manner, the bill would be covered. I got excited when I heard this and wanted to go and watch, but Dad said it was already done by the time I heard about it. Then, before I knew it, the school year was over. Summertime. Oh, the joy. 3 whole glorious months of no homework, no school, and getting to stay up late playing outside. Now, we could finish all of those adventures which always seemed to be interrupted by moms everywhere hollering out the back door that it was dinner time. Because, during the school year, dinner time meant time to eat, finish homework, have a bath, and then off to bed to be ready for school the next day. Many a fine game of hide and seek had been put on hold, only to be forgotten by the next evening when our young minds found other things to occupy us. But no more. Summer vacation was here, and all I had to do was get to my dad's truck so it could begin. Thus were my thoughts as I hid behind the thick hedge in front of my school, watching my nemesis. Wayne the Rogue and his henchmen circled the parking lot like vultures waiting for their prey, namely, me. They were well aware that our farm had burnt down, and I could no longer just escape out the back way through the woods to run home, since I had to be picked up and dropped off by my parents now. They seemed to not even care that I was having a hard time since our family home burnt down, and in fact, took great joy in knowing the fates had changed the tactical advantage I always enjoyed. My advantage, of course, was that I, unlike the typical prey, fought like a predator, so it was easy for me to anticipate their pursuit and throw them off the trail. I was also better in the classroom, which meant I automatically earned my position as prey of choice, since I was smarter than them. They seemed to find intelligence in insult, a point I had driven in firmly that very day less than an hour before, when I won the teacher's summer opener quiz and was awarded the coveted first prize, a thick comic book. It was much coveted by all of us, as it had been on display on the teacher's desk all the past week. Our homeroom teacher was a kindly older gentleman whose name I have since forgotten. He liked to finish out the school year by holding a free-for-all oral quiz about the things we had learned during the school year. Each of our names were written on the chalkboard where a tick mark was added for each correct response. At the end, it had come down to me and Wayne the Rogue, the only 6th grader I had ever seen that shaved and stood a full foot taller than everyone else in the school. This was, in fact, due to his being 2 years older than the rest of us, having been held back twice in the 3rd grade. The final tie-breaking question was, who was the 16th President of the United States? As quick as I was to get my hand up, Wayne beat me to the draw. I kept my hand up even after he had been called upon to answer the question, with a faint hope he would get it wrong, as he sometimes did. Everything seemed to go in slow motion for the next few minutes. My arm grew heavy. I looked from the comic book to the scores on the blackboard and watched my teacher ask Wayne to give the correct answer. Of course, I knew the answer, as Wayne himself had made sure of this when he decided around President's Day that it would be fun to see how many times he could dunk my face in mud puddles at recess. A favorite springtime activity of his, as I learned. I, for one, was not too thrilled with the game, and was given the opportunity to volunteer to make holiday cutouts for decorating the classroom during recess. So, I was able to avoid going outside where I was available to play. My task simply consisted of tracing busts of Lincoln and Washington onto construction paper where they were projected from an overhead projector, and then cutting them out. Of course, my assignment was one of the presidents now in question, and I was itching to spit it out. Wayne finally began to speak, and upon hearing the first syllables of the name, I knew I would never see that book again after this day. Then, to my surprise, he said the wrong last name. I could not believe it, and as I thankfully put my arm down when called upon, I blurted out the correct answer before it could escape. I did it. I had won. The school bell rang to announce the beginning of summer as I walked back to my desk to tuck my coveted prize in my book bag. The thought occurred to me that I should thank Wayne for helping me to learn the very thing which helped me beat him, and maybe even let him read a little over my shoulder. Several people started singing Schools Out loudly, and everyone was cheering the end of the school year. Everyone, that is, except Wayne the Rogue. With steam escaping from his ears and eyes filled with fire, he was celebrating in his usual manner. Of course, this was to glare at me, while rubbing his fists together in a silent promise to give me proper congratulations once I left the safety of the school buildings. And so, I considered these things as I judged the distance between my hiding spot and my dad's truck, at the end of the buses which waited to take the others home. I was also calculating how fast I would have to run to get there before Wayne or his henchmen spotted me and moved to intercept me at the pass. Just then, several of my friends walked by, and I casually sauntered out of the bushes to hide amongst a throng of other kids. By keeping low, I was actually able to make it halfway to the truck before they spotted me and came on the run like hounds after a rabbit. My first instinct was to run, but seeing them coming at me, I decided I would like to talk with my friends for a few seconds more until they got a bit closer. I was enjoying a hearty round of congratulations. Then the time had come, and I knew it was going to be now or never. As Wayne was nearing the crowd from behind, I bolted out the front and straight into my dad's truck without even getting winded. Looking in the mirror as we drove away from the school for the last time, I saw my plan had worked. You see, if I had run immediately when they gave chase, they would have had time to alter course around the other kids. But by waiting, I was treated to what I was seeing now. A large pile of bodies with arms and legs flailing about as the pursuers had crashed headlong into the unsuspecting group in an effort to get to me. I had mixed emotions as I looked at the comic book on the ride to our new home. Sure, I had won, not only today, but many times during the school year. But it seemed that even though I had always won these games of cat and mouse, the fact that I was forced to flee by bullies meant that in a way they had won too. Especially because I knew they thoroughly enjoyed the chase. Somehow, it added a sense of defeat to my victory. Settling back in the truck seat, I took out the new comic and began to look it over. It was not simply a comic book, but rather a graphic novel. There was an actual text story with action drawings throughout. As I began to read the story, I noticed something on the inside cover. The teacher had handwritten a note. Congratulations to my best reading student. I hope you enjoy this and read the summer away. Now, that took me by surprise and made me consider several things. The first thing was the teacher had to have written this in here before the contest. He did not have time to write anything after I won. I was the leader on the reader board, but the contest was a sampling of all subjects, so others were right up there with me in the competition. How could he know I would win? I can assume the final question was intentional, based upon the experience of making bust cutouts of the subject. But my final competitor, Wayne, had almost beaten me, and he was directly responsible for my gaining the needed knowledge in an unforgettable way. What if he had won? He was not the best reading student by a long shot. In fact, the handwritten note would have been an insult to him, which would constantly remind him of me. As such, it would have lent defeat to his victory. I looked up as the truck stopped and found we were at home in Chesterton. Getting out of the truck, Dad opened the garage door, and I could not believe my eyes. The orange trike from the shop was there. Were we fixing it? This was possible, as my dad was good with fiberglass. I put the book in my bag and followed Dad into the garage. "So why is the trike here?" I asked. "The guys at the shop pitched in and gave it to you for graduating to junior high," Dad said, smiling. "It was the professor's idea." I could not believe it. I had admired this trike since I first saw it. Sure, it needed some work, but that was okay because I knew how to do a lot of it, and Dad knew the rest. I followed Dad into the house and changed out of my school clothes. It was summer, and there would be plenty of time to mess with the trike. Right now, I wanted to explore the neighborhood and see what was in this part of the world. Going out to my bike, I first rode around the house to look at the property. The house was a double-wide trailer on 5 acres. A chain-link fence surrounded the property on 2 sides, separating the neighbor's property from ours. To the north, a slight ditch preceded the rise of about 15 feet where the railroad tracks were. As if to emphasize the close proximity, an Amtrak commuter train blasted past very fast. I made a note to stay clear of those tracks because the Amtrak was not as noisy as the freight trains I was used to at the trailer court. I had not heard it coming until it was here. The front porch of the house faced the railroad track, and there were several nice big trees in the yard. In the shade of the tall trees was a picnic table and barbecue grill, along with several chairs. It looked like a nice place to have a cookout. I rode my bike out of the yard and turned to go deeper into the neighborhood. About 3 houses past the end of our property, where the road looped around to the south, there was a ranch with 2 large barns. A sign on the fence said it was a riding stable. I watched an attractive girl close to my age riding a horse in one of the corrals for a minute before riding on. It took very little time to circle back around to the driveway at our house, and I realized this was a very small neighborhood of about a dozen houses. Not real big, but also not too small. I had seen several other young people my age, and would get to know them in the days to come. A few days after summer started, I was out in the yard checking out a very small pond in the yard. It was about 4 feet across and would have been considered a mud puddle, except that it was very deep. I had let a sinker down into it with my fishing pole, and it never hit bottom. This was totally amazing to me, as I knew there was at least 100 feet of line on my reel. I also saw fish in the hole. I tied a hook and sinker to my line and put a worm on the hook. Letting it into the hole, it did not go very far before I caught a nice-sized sunfish. I released the fish back into the water, and on the next try was rewarded with a bass of about 12 inches. I was catching fish in a hole in my yard. As I started to bait up again, I heard a motorcycle behind me and looked up to see a guy about my age riding up. He parked the bike and walked to where I was. "Hey there," he said. "Hi," I replied. "What are you doing?" he asked. "I found this hole in the yard, and there are fish in it," I said. "I never saw anything like this." "Yeah, I got one of them at my house too," he said. "I think someone drilled down and tapped a natural spring that runs under this area. My name's Craig. What's yours?" "I'm Kevin," I said, and held out my hand to shake. "Welcome to the neighborhood," Craig said. "So, you like to fish?" "Yeah, I love to fish," I said. "I would fish every day if I could." "You want to see a better place to fish?" he asked. "Sure," I responded enthusiastically. "Grab your stuff and come on," he said, getting on the motorcycle. "Just put your worms in your pocket and hang on to your rod." I put my little bag of hooks and sinkers in my pocket and tried to put my worm box in my shirt pocket, but it was too big. I stuffed the worms into my shirt through the collar and moved them off the side so they would not get crushed, and climbed behind him on the bike. We rode around the corner to his house where he grabbed his fishing pole and then headed down the country road away from the railroad tracks in our neighborhood. When we were almost to the freeway, about 2 miles away, he turned onto a dirt road in the trees. "Okay, hang on, it gets bumpy here," he shouted. We bumped along for a few minutes through the woods following the trail. It was a mud trail, and there were ruts where other dirt bikes and trucks had been playing. Within a few minutes, we came into the open beside a very large gravel pit lake. Highway 94 was to our left to the south, and I remembered seeing this lake when Dad and I were returning from South Bend. We spent the rest of the day just fishing at the lake, catching lots of great fish, and later in the evening when he dropped me off at home, I knew I had made a friend as well as found a great spot to fish. That evening at dinner, I told Dad about the lake, and he said he wanted to check it out soon. Several days later, Dad came home in the middle of the day pulling a small trailer behind his truck. When he backed it up to the garage, I helped him unload a Yamaha YZ250 dirt bike into the garage. It seems he made a deal and accepted the bike as partial payment for a repair he did. We got the bike running and went for a ride to check out the new lake. We fished for a couple hours before going home, and it seemed like we had really found a good place to live. Then, one morning when I went outside to see what the day had in store, I found myself walking through the neighborhood. I came again to the stables and saw the girl there by the barn combing a horse. She was nice looking and smiled when she noticed me, so I walked over to introduce myself. Her name was Stacy, and she said she took care of the horses for her father and led people on horseback tours in the Indiana Dunes National Park across the highway. I spent the day hanging around with Stacy at the stables. She taught me the proper way to cinch a horse and gave me pointers on riding. I had ridden a little bit before this, but the things she taught me made it more enjoyable. These were good things to know because I still planned to be a cowboy with his own ranch when I grew up. As I was getting ready to leave that evening, her father pulled in his truck towing a horse trailer full of sheep. When he climbed out, he instructed Stacy and I to help get the sheep out and into the corral behind the house. I did my best to help herd the sheep in and then headed home. I was almost in my house before I realized I had not introduced myself to her father, and he acted like I was one of his kids by telling me what to do. I guess I was accepted. Arriving home, I saw the barbecue pit was smoking and went around the house to find Dad sitting at the picnic table with the professor, my mom, and some lady I didn't know. Turns out the lady was the professor's girlfriend, and my dad had invited them over to grill the fish he and I caught several days before. There were also hamburgers and hot dogs. I said hello as I sat down and then looked to where Mark was playing with a Doberman Pinscher in the yard by the house. I had never seen the dog before. "Whose dog is that?" I asked. "It's ours now," Dad said. "I brought her home this morning. Her owner was moving into an apartment and she needed a bigger place to live, so I got her." Mark came over to the table and the dog pushed its head into my lap as if to say hello. I petted it gently for a few minutes before I heard the sound of a train. The dog perked up her ears, and as the train started to pass, she took off running after it. She was amazingly fast and nearly caught up to the Amtrak. The professor laughed, turning to Dad. "She's pretty fast," he said. "What are you going to do when she catches one?" We all laughed at this as my dad and the professor got up to check the food. I could see 2 whole bass wrapped in foil along with the rest of the stuff on the grill. The professor opened up the foil and the bass was hot but hard to flake with a fork. "Perfect," he said, and took both bass back to the table for himself and his girlfriend. I watched them eat the bass as I ate a hamburger. How could they eat almost raw fish? I knew the fish was very undercooked as it was hard to peel from the bones as they ate. They seemed to enjoy it though, so I did not say anything. I just knew if the professor cooked any fish for me, I would have to make sure it was well cooked. "So, do you like the trike?" the professor asked. "Oh, it's great," I said. "It needs work, but I think Dad and I can get it fixed up. Then I just need to get older so I can get a motorcycle license." "Or you could just make sure and drive carefully so the police do not pull you over and do not find out you do not have a license," the professor said, sweeping his hair back into a ponytail and tying it there. I think my eyes lit up as he said that because my mother spoke up immediately. "You do not even think of writing off this property until you get your license." I looked over at her and nodded before looking to my dad, who just smiled and gave me a wink. I knew he was siding with the professor. I changed the subject so it would not become an issue. I turned back to the professor. "I thought a lot about what you told me about cold spots and ghosts," I started. "After we talked, I never did see Gracie again. Then there was a cold spot by the door to the basement, and it went away after I showed Dad where Uncle Rudy's pistol was above the basement stairs." "And I thought I was the only one that felt that cold spot," Mom said, and continued eating. "Then there was another cold spot by my bedroom door," I said quietly. "One night, Grandpa said that was where Grandma fell, and I got to thinking about it." "Did you figure out why she was there?" he asked. "I think so," I smiled. "I found this old brooch under the house in the dirt right where Grandma fell. I took the brooch and cleaned it up and kept it safe because it had a picture of Grandma and Grandpa when they got married." Mom got up from the table and went into the house. "I got to thinking, maybe Grandma was looking for her lost brooch," I said, and watched Mom sit back at the table with us. The professor sat back and lit up one of his off-colored cigarettes and handed it to his girlfriend. He blew out smoke and then asked, "So, what did you do?" "Well, after Grandpa left and Dad went to bed, I got the brooch and talked to Grandma for a minute before I left the brooch in the cold spot and went to bed. When I got up in the morning, the brooch was gone. I guess Grandma got it." "No, she didn't," Mom said, and laid the brooch on the table. "I got up in the middle of the night and found it laying on the floor. I put it in my robe pocket and forgot about it until now. I was wearing my robe when I left the house during the fire. I thought it was strange since I never get up during the night, but I thought someone woke me up and I checked on you kids." I saw Dad looking at the brooch and could tell he was thinking about Grandma. I was surprised and a little downhearted. Looking out at Mark playing with the dog, I wondered if Grandma left the house before the fire, since she did not get the brooch after all. "Did you feel the cold spot after that?" the professor asked. "Did either cold spot come back?" "No," I said. "I thought Grandma had moved on." "Well, maybe she did," the professor said. "If you did not feel the cold spot, then maybe she did not want the brooch but wanted your mom to find it because she knew she would keep it safe for you guys to remember her by." I brightened at this thought. Maybe things had worked out the way they were supposed to after all. I hope you enjoyed this look into the campaign at Fort Stix. That's all for now, but I'll be back again next week with another story, just for you. Until then, sleep well.